So now I'm going to add the micro USB socket, which is going to be sitting down here in this corner, and I need some wire for this purpose. So I've got here some white single strand wire and some black single strand wire. Black's going to be my ground or negative, and white in this case is going to be my positive. Ideally I'd have red for positive, but I've only got multi-strand. The difference between multi-strand and single strand is multi-strand is made from lots of very thin wires, all basically encased in an insulating sheath, and it's more flexible. But when you're soldering with it, or when you're doing electronics work with it, the little strands sometimes kind of splay and get tangled a bit like crazy hair. And so single strand for a situation like this, where there's going to be no mechanical movement which could break the wires, because the whole thing is going to be encased in the 3D print, it's much easier to work with. Okay, so I'm going to cut myself, how much is that? About 8 centimeters. I want to make sure, maybe 10, that I've got enough wire so that I don't find myself short. Same for the black. Okay, let's put that wire out of the way now. I'm going to use my side cutters here. Make sure the hole's the right size. That looks good. Okay, and I need to just I'm going to make one end quite short, because that's the end that's going to solder on here, and the other end I'm actually going to make quite a bit longer, and you'll see why. And I'm going to wrap it around my finger like, whoops, can't see quite clearly here, can you? I'm going to wrap it around my finger like this to strip that. Now when you're stripping wire, it's not quite calibrated like this. That's already stripped on one end, so the longer end goes here. You need to obviously press quite hard to cut through the insulation, but then release pressure when you pull away. And now I've made it too wide. So release the pressure when you pull away, otherwise, let's try again there, shall we? There, otherwise you're just digging into the metal. Okay, so 2 long exposed wires and 2 shorter wires. Now actually, should I have done that yet? Because I might find these wires are too long, way too long. Well, we'll see. I might be able to just tuck them out of the way inside the 3D print. Okay, now in order to be able to solder these wires onto the LED strip, what I want to do is actually I want to sew them into the card, so that if I pull on the wire, it doesn't pull directly onto the join, and it's also going to hold it all together more neatly when I come to do the soldering. So I'm going to just get a piece of scrap wood, should I say, a bit of scrap plywood here. I'm going to place the card on top, and then what I've got here is a countersinking tool for making countersunk holes in wood, for countersunk screws. And let me see, I'm going to have, let's put one hole there, and one hole there. Now, it seems a bit strange this, but hopefully it'll all make sense shortly. One hole there and one hole there. Okay, so those holes look a little bit straggly, because the countersinking tool doesn't do a very fine point, does it? But now what I'm going to do, without stabbing myself, is just push through a sharp pencil point. The hole's already there, so that's the key thing about the countersinking tool. There, and I've made those holes a little bit more manageable. Now, of course, I could have laser cut these holes originally when I cut out the card A, but I didn't quite know whether the LED strips were going to be stuck, so that's why I've kind of left it to this point. Now, the +5 is on this side, and it seems like it's going to be quite a tricky one to do, so I think I'm going to do this first. So what I want to do is feed this in, give myself plenty of wire here, feed it back out again, and then effectively this wants to get bent over and soldered on there. That's what I want to do. So I might just now try and push this back in again. Now I don't want to rip the card here. want to try and do this as neatly and as carefully as I can, but I'm going to stop at that point. The key thing is that that end of the wire wants to be touching the pad of the LED strip. Okay, so let's heat up the soldering iron here. Just going to pause it while it heats up. Okay, so we're almost there. Right, let's go. And I'm actually going to turn this around a little bit. I think it's going to be easier for me to solder it from this direction. So I want to heat the wire and the pad. Beautiful. Now what I've actually done here to help myself, which I hadn't mentioned, is I've actually put a little bit of solder on the pad in advance. So prior to doing all this, and I should have shown you, I've put some solder on the pad and then I've made the holes and then I've sewn it in. So sorry, should have made that more clear really, shouldn't I? Now let's feed in the white here. You know what I've also done wrong here as well? I'm so daft. I've used black for positive. Oh well, I'm here now. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to make sure that when I solder up my micro USB socket, I put black to positive. Aye. That's what happens when you rush, eh? Oh dear. Here we go. Let's feed this round. Okay, let's feed this in here. Now, if anything, that hole's a little bit too far away. I'd be more comfortable if I'd made that hole a bit closer, but I suppose it's not easy with the location of the cutout for the micro USB port. So that is touching. Let's solder that up. Bit of solder on the soldering iron first. And we're done. So adding the solder to the pad, the LED strip pad, really helps there. Okay, so I've got to remember, white is negative, black is now going to be positive, and I now want to solder these onto here. Now looking at the length of these wires, they are too long. They're definitely too long, so I'm going to feed that one around there. So I don't want it to obscure the light from the LED. So I'm going to have to cut these back, and to do that I need to hold these wires firmly without damaging the card or the LEDs. So I've got some thin nose pliers here, which I'm going to use, and again I just need to make sure that everything is working out for the best here. Yeah, so I'm thinking as if I can probably cut off a good 1.5 centimeters there probably. And then, using these thin nose pliers, strip back the wire. And again, it needs to be stripped back quite a bit there. It's difficult to use the wire strippers. As I say, you need to press quite hard to get through the insulation and then release your grip a little bit to then pull off the plastic insulation. And as for the white one here, the same probably applies. I can trim off a little bit of the excess there. And then strip. Okay. Good. So now we're going to solder on, come on, get back into the shot. I'm going to solder on here the micro USB socket. So black is positive, I mustn't forget that. I'm going to solder that on first. So I'm going to put a little bend in this wire. I'm going to push that through the VCC, is it? I mean, that's the voltage rail. And then what I'm going to try and do here is just bend that back a little bit. This isn't technically what you should do, but I tend to find that if you're not that good at soldering, I'm an expert of course, but if you're not that good at soldering, it just helps to do that. Let's get my third hand here. I'm going to hold this, and by just looping that round, it's holding it in place, so when I solder the wire onto the pad, it should be hopefully a nice straightforward process. Here goes. Touching the pad and the wire, and of course there you go, it suddenly took, it wasn't going and then it suddenly went. That's looking nice. Okay, same here with the white. I'm just going to bend that back a little bit so it doesn't fall out. The white is my ground, correct. Remember, I got that one wrong. Bit of solder onto the soldering iron. Apply the heat to both the pad and the wire, and after a few seconds add your solder, and there we go, I just saw that take. So you're wanting to make little volcanoes here where the solder connects to the round pad. Okay, so before I go any further with this, what I actually want to do at this point is do a test. So I've got myself a USB cable. I don't want it to touch the soldering iron here. Let's plug this in and see what happens. And look at that, absolutely wonderful. Perfect! Okay, so how are we doing on time? 11 minutes. I think at this point I'm going to stop, and I'm then going to, my next video, I'm going to mount it into the actual 3D print.